Good evening, everyone. My name is Ross Tangadal, the director and publisher of Cornerstone Press, and I am here to welcome you, each of you, to the launch event for the inaugural title in the new Cornerstone Press Back Home series, Robert Miltner's Ohio Apertures. The Cornerstone Press is the student-staffed teaching press housed in the Department of English at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. Since 1984, we have published over 45 titles in multiple genres, though we now focus exclusively on short fiction, poetry, and nonfiction. The Back Home series focuses on nonfiction about the Midwest, and Ohio Apertures served as the catalyst for us beginning this new and exciting series. But before we get to the book, I would like to thank a number of individuals and organizations who support Cornerstone Press in one way or another. As a student-staffed teaching press, support from multiple stakeholders is crucial to our success. With that, we thank the following. From UWSP, the Department of English, in particular Chair Rebecca Stevens and the press's executive editor, Jeff Snowbarger. The School of Humanities and Global Studies, in particular Assistant Dean Tobias Barsky, Karin Heiler, and Samantha Petch. The College of Letters and Science, in particular Dean Joshua Hagan, Aaron Schaufenbuhl, Scott Tappa, and Tony Romano. Chancellor Thomas Gibson, Provost Greg Summers, Christina Rickert, Heidi Wallner, and Kathy Heck of Financial Operations. University Communication and Marketing, in particular Nick Schultz and Carrie Hebler. Robin Spindler of Print and Design, Katie Horn and Dale Dixon of the University Store and Text Rental, Sue Fisher and Eva Hathaway of Mailing Services, Megan Wahlberg of the Bursar's Office, and Logan Weston and Ihor Bartoszewski in IT. We would also like to thank our printing partners in Stevens Point, Warzala Publishing, in particular Roger Beyer, and Digicopy, in particular Shelley Martin, Nikki Berlowski, and our Cornerstone alum, Jacoby Schrader. Finally, but most importantly, I would like to thank my excellent student staff who make me proud every day to be their teacher, press director, and publisher. Thank you from the book, Ohio Apertures. As is our custom, all of our student staff are on the copyright page. So those that worked on this book in one way or another over the last year are Joanna Honore, Colin Aspinall, Colton Barr, Shelby Ballweg, Seth Barnes, Kala Butke, Ryan Condon, Kira Gedkin, Tucker DeGale, Andrew Eisel, Amber Ellsworth, Emma Fisher, Ava Freeman, Morgan Frostman, Sid Hart, Claire Hanecki, Nicole Hogard, Amy Jordan, Aya Kepsinski, George Klum, Jacob Majizak, Gabrielle McClung, Kira Meidenbauer, Dylan Morey, James Paul, Caitlin Piotrowski, Abigail Shortell, Tara Sparble, and Caitlin Voorhees. Their hard work, tenacity, and spirit makes all of this worthwhile, and Robert especially let me know that the staff for this book was outstanding, and I agree with him. Morgan Frostman and Kira Gidkin, who you'll see this evening, deserve special mention for their work coordinating this event this evening, and Robert's editors, Colin Aspinall and Gabrielle McClung, also deserve a virtual round of applause. If we were in person, we'd be clapping for them. So, with that, it is time to celebrate the real reason why we are all here this evening, Robert Miltner and his book, Ohio Apertures. In a press release last week, I said the following, quote, Robert Miltner is a class act, a thoughtful storyteller, and a graceful artist. Ohio Apertures rings with the kind of truth that lived experience brings, and it is the perfect way to usher in the new Back Home series at Cornerstone Press, which endeavors to bring Midwestern nonfiction to the fore. Thank you for joining us tonight as we release the first book in what we hope will be a successful series of nonfiction titles about the Midwestern experience. And thank you to Robert's family and friends for joining us this evening from all over the United States. And thank you to the parents, family, and friends of our staff members for supporting them in their wild bookmaking lives. I now hand it over to our Director of Operations, English major Morgan Frostman. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank everyone who has shown up today. It means the world to Cornerstone Press and Robert Miltner that you took time out of your day and your night to come see what we have spent so much time and energy on. As Dr. Tangadal said, I am Morgan. I am this semester's Director of Operations. This is my second semester working for the press. Last semester, I was kind of clueless on what I signed myself up for. I walked into the first day of class, or shall I say I signed into a Zoom meeting, and was told, we are publishing books. You are gonna do great and let's do it. Obviously, anyone is going to be a little caught off guard by this. However, Dr. Tangadal gave us all of our roles and we instantly got to work. I saw as Colin Aspinall, Gabby McClung, and Kala Butke led a team of editors to edit Ohio Apertures to its fullest potential. The whole class sat and judged book cover after book cover around our tiny laptops over Zoom as Shelby Balwig and Colton Barr and their team of production associates finally came up with the beautiful cover and the inside format that is Ohio Apertures. Once that was all done and we had our physical copy of the advanced review copy, I thought everything was good to go. I was ready to hit my little Staples button that yells, "That was easy." However, there was so much more to do. Now we're in spring of 2021 semester. Now it's time to market the book and figure out how we are going to actually get these books into people's hands and into stores. Oh, and not to mention, we have to plan a book launch. Once again, it was time to get started. I sat in admiration as our social media took off. As you wouldn't be sitting here if most of you didn't see our social event on social media. Big thanks to Caitlin Piotrowski for that one. Her hard work has definitely paid off. Meeting after meeting, our marketing director, Emma Fisher, came up with ideas on how to reach out to people all over the Midwest to make sure they knew Robert's name and that he had an amazing book coming out. I was excited to see that our sales director, James Paul, came up with a list of multiple bookstores who are willing to keep our books in store, and how Nicole Hugard could write flawless press release after press release to let people know we have a book being published. And finally, it was time to launch the book. Kira Gedkin and I watched everyone work so hard to come up with the book, and we were in charge of making the event come to life. Every other member of Cornerstone Press has made this so easy to plan because of how smooth everything has gone since day one. It has been the most inspiring thing that I have been a part of during my academic career. Watching a book go from an idea or a manuscript to a beautiful book that you can hold in your hands is something that I will cherish every day. And that is because of the hard work of Cornerstone Press. The members of Cornerstone Press inspire me and motivate me every day with all of the hard work that they put forth on every project that has come our way. And I am so proud and honored to be their director of operations this semester. And we couldn't have done it all without an amazing professor, Dr. Tangadal. Now, without further ado, I do have a short video to introduce all of the amazing staff of Cornerstone Press, spring of 2021. I hope you enjoy it.
Hi, I'm Gabby McClung, this semester's editor-in-chief. I served as the managing editor for Ohio Apertures, and it was such an incredible experience working on such a unique and interesting collection.
My name is Kala Butke. I am currently the managing editor this semester at Cornerstone Press, and I happily helped do some early developmental editing for Ohio Apertures.
Hello everybody, and thank you so much for being here. My name is Shelby Balwig, and my role here at the Cornerstone Press is co-executive production designer. So what that means is that me and the rest of my team, we work really hard on making really cool book covers for you to look at while you're enjoying those really awesome books that we publish. Obviously, Ohio Apertures is no different. We are so excited for you guys to all get your hands on it, and we really hope that you enjoy. Thanks again.
Hi, I'm Colton. I have a major in psychology with a minor in sociology and creative writing. And I'm co-executive production designer with Shelby. Together, me and Shelby led a team to design the cover of Robert's book, Ohio Apertures. It was a delight to work with Robert and everyone else, and I'm very pleased with how the cover turned out. I hope you are as well. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, my name is Kira Meidenbauer. I was an associate production designer with the Cornerstone Press this semester, and I had a lot of fun working on both the inner layout and cover of the book.
my name is Cassie Russ, and for this semester, my staff position was to be on a production crew. I worked on the cover as well as the layout for Ohio Apertures, and I had a lot of fun doing it.
Hi, my name is Morgan, this semester's Director of Operations. This is my second semester with the press. This semester, I helped plan and execute this book launch that you are attending right now. I have enjoyed my time working with Robert. He has made it so easy to make this book launch come to life. I hope you enjoy the book launch and don't forget to grab your copy of Ohio Apertures.
Hi everyone, my name is Kira Gedkin and I am the Chief of Staff here at Cornerstone Press. I haven't worked on Ohio Apertures for very long, but since the beginning of this semester, I've been working very hard on this awesome book launch for our author, Robert Miltner. Book launches and promotional events are my main focus as Chief of Staff. I love what I do because I get to come up with great ideas to sell more books. I also get to work very closely with the authors to help create their dream book launches. I've loved working with Robert. He is so great to chat with and is such an amazing author with great ideas. I really hope you love your book launch, Robert, and I hope we made you proud because you are definitely an inspiration to all of us here at Cornerstone Press. Plus, I hope you love my twinkly lights. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Caitlin Petrowski and I am the Events and Promotions Director for Cornerstone Press this semester. I am the person that you see posting on social media every day and marketing our social media campaigns for Ohio Apertures and our upcoming books as well. One thing I really enjoy about Cornerstone Press is the things that you discover that deal with the English major that you may not have realized, such as social media, which is something that I really love and enjoy.
Hi everyone, I'm Claire Hanecki. I am a senior editing assistant this year for the Cornerstone Press, and I run the Cornerstone podcast. And one of my favorite things about running the podcast is that I get to talk to the authors who are all so amazing and with the rest of the press.
And that was the wonderful Cornerstone Press Spring Staff of 2021. On behalf of everyone in the staff, I would like to thank you for being here tonight once again to see all of our hard work. So also to invite you to follow the link that is in the comments floating around to purchase Ohio Apertures to see all of the staff's hard work. And if you are here with someone with the Cornerstone Press to see their name in the book. I would like to now give you a little introduction on the person of the hour, Robert Miltner. Robert Miltner has taken the past 5 years to write a detailed, intricate collection of nonfiction stories to create Ohio Apertures. Robert is a former songwriter, a professor emeritus of English at Kent State University Stark, who loves to travel and create research projects out of his writing endeavors. He taught high school English before becoming a professor and a full-time writer. Ohio Apertures is a collection of creative nonfiction that turns its attention to Northeast Ohio's position as both a Great Lakes state and the North Coast of America. Its 24 selections, which include flash memoir, lyric essays, narrative nonfiction, literary nonfiction, travel writing, and historical excavations of place, trace the author's life from early childhood onward, offering a template for understanding the impact of place, region, family, literacy, and cultural influence on the shaping of a Midwest identity. Without further ado, I would like to introduce the award-winning author of 2 books of prose poetry, Hotel Utopia and Orpheus and Echo, and a short story collection, And Your Bird Can Sing. And now Ohio Apertures. Everyone, here is Robert Miltner.
Hello. Hello.
We can hear you, Robert. Oh, you muted yourself.
Again, I'm back. Thanks for the generous introduction from all of you. It's been a pleasure working with everybody at the press. This has been a remarkable experience leading up to this book. And thank you all for coming to my launch for tonight. I want to thank two people in particular. The cover art is from the artwork of Morgan Dyer, who I met at Vermont Studio Center. And I so appreciate her letting us use some of the imagery from her art for the cover of this book. It's a beautiful cover and it's perfect for the book. And I want to thank my wife, Molly, who supports me through this whole book from journey through publication and helped me with all the technical stuff, including the amazing Instagram she did the other day. I want to dedicate this reading to my brother, Kenneth Meltner, my father, Eugene Charles Meltner, and to my mother, Genevieve Alice Higgins Meltner. I'm going to read two selections from the book, one a shorter piece and one a longer piece. The first is entitled Audio Echo. The only known recording of Virginia Woolf reading her work aloud is from a 1937 BBC radio broadcast. The graininess of the audio is in the recorder, not the reader. I know Woolf by her prose, by fading images from book covers. Her monaural voice, though unfamiliar, does not seem surprising. Elegant, carefully cadenced, what I imagine upper-class Bloomsbury British might sound like. Have I always heard her sound this way in my head, as I imagined Clarissa Dalloway would sound when speaking? Woolf's recorded talk is titled Craftsmanship, but in actuality, she's telling a story about the story of words, their histories, preferences, about why writers ask them to dance in their sentences, how words hate making money or being lectured about in public. And I'm not certain I agree with her when she says words hate being useful. Outside the window is a snowy Northeast Ohio afternoon. The monochromatic scene outdoors reminds me of black and white photographs from the 19th through the mid-20th century. Flakes of snow fall at a rate perfectly comparable to the pace at which Woolf speaks in this recording. 4 crows hop and flap around on the slanted roof of the house across the alley. On the thin branches of a huge maple tree in the yard, 3 more balance, rising and falling with the gust and pitch of the wind. These birds could be 4 dancers with 3 more waiting in the wings to join them on stage, or paper puppets from an old Eastern European tradition. They could be letters at play, forming words, reconfiguring into variations on themselves. 7 crows in a snowy landscape. The birds rise together in flight, a sporadic flocking, as they disappear from the frame of my small window. I imagine this is how lead type might tumble after use from a letterpress case in a print shop. How window is typecase is window. How words spill easily off a tongue and out of a mouth. This wintry afternoon has a graininess about it, a suffused texture, as if from an old album of fading photographs. I search for a useful word that might give voice to a blue feeling or a dark thought, but no words take flight from my tongue. By now, the crows have flown into the distance, but still I hear their raucous cawing, a raspy, haunted sort of sound, as if from an ancient time. A monaural song crafted from useful words, sounding, echoing, evolving towards stereo. The second piece is a longer piece. It's entitled Tasting a New Moon. My mother grew up on Cleveland's near west side, eating home-baked loaves of white bread made from bleached flour. A child of the Depression, she was captivated by the post-war availability of time-saving, store-bought packages of sliced bread. As much as my two brothers and I couldn't get enough of our Grandma Ethel's fresh bread hand-sliced while still warm from the oven, we were keen to the ease of grabbing slices of Wonder Bread from the bread box, slathering them with Skippy or Jif peanut butter and Welch's Concord grape jelly. Often, we'd have a wax paper wrapped sandwich in our pockets or in paper bags when running out the door for a game of pickup baseball or to explore the woods and fields at the end of our street in Northeast Ohio. Raising three boys, caring for her older sister Ruth, and maintaining a house while my father, who worked for Republic Steel as an industrial bolt salesman, traveled eastern Ohio and western Pennsylvania. It was inevitable that ease would become my mother's culinary motto. And when she had time, the cream puffs she could make from scratch, using her mother's recipe, tasted exquisite. While she could make about 24 different types of Christmas cookies, many of them passed down family recipes. Over the years, she supplemented or replaced the Christmas tradition of making her own cookies from scratch. And instead, she drove her little blue Ford Falcon to the nearby Sparkles supermarket to occasionally buy knockout gingerbread men and assembly line iced cutouts. So it was that my mother's idea of pastry baking eventually came to mean opening a package of pre-packaged bake-at-home dough. Not only was it quick and easy, but it had the added joy of the scent of just fresh from the oven pastry, which wafted from the small kitchen oven throughout the rest of our suburban ranch home. My mother's duties seemed to her complete as she set a cloth towel-lined bowl of finished fresh bakery on the dinner table. It was at such a dinner I encountered my first croissant. But it wasn't an actual croissant. My mother had just popped open a thin cylinder constructed of cardboard with tin end caps that held packaged biscuit dough. After extruding the separated circular discs, she arranged the dough discs in rows on a cookie tray, rolled and reshaped them into something resembling a bell curve, then stretched the ends into points, sort of like gluey white smiles. She called them crescent rolls. What I knew of crescents, I discovered in the Encyclopedia Britannica that my parents had purchased for my two brothers and me, in the volume that included the letter E for Egypt. I first read about the Fertile Crescent, which included the Euphrates, Tigris, and the Nile rivers, synonymous with the cradle of civilization comprised of Upper and Lower Egypt, Mesopotamia, Assyria, Phoenicia, and Palestine. On the map, it resembled a quarter moon, either waxing or waning. On the table where we ate supper, the towel-lined bowl frequently held warm crescent dinner rolls. But not just any dinner. These were crescent rolls produced by the Pillsbury Company, which had come to national prominence in 1949 when it began hosting the National Bake Off at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. A year later, they followed with the introduction in the new supermarkets of the 1950s of packaged dough offered in the Give It a Pop cylinder. In what today would look like an episode of Mad Men, Rudy Purse, copywriter for Pillsbury's ad agency, imagined the wad of dough morphing into a small, pudgy, cartoon-like doll that came to life. Pillsbury had found its mascot, the Doughboy, who was soon accompanied by a catchy sing-along jingle that celebrated, in this edited slant rhyme, how mothers could take lovin' from the oven and serve their families ready-made emotions every bit as warm as Grandma's home-baked bread. When my parents went out with their friends for dinner and drinks, my mother would leave my brothers and me with a special treat, crescent dogs, with the dough wrapped around an Oscar Mayer wiener and a folded slice of Kraft American cheese, and always best served with a side of tater tots. Such culinary artistry was a clear indication that regional cuisine was changing in the Midwest during the early 1960s. Why waste time on local apple cider, fresh cake donuts, or clam bakes in the autumn when all you needed to do was whistle for the crescent dogs to come running? As the use of refrigerated pastry grew, so too did its shelf life from mere weeks to multiple months. Concurrent with such product development was the rise of margarine products, vegetable oils joined by beta carotene for yellow color and isolated natural butter compounds for real imitation butter flavor. That is, when added to refrigerated pastry, did not go rancid. Along this trajectory, Pillsbury went beyond the successful crescent roll, adding the new Butterflake line that made the crescent roll more like its French cousin, that is to say, an actual croissant. But I was young then, eating those crescent dogs, and I did not know that what I took as real was merely a simulacrum, a false version of the actual. Throughout my early childhood, though my early child was along the Rocky River in Cleveland's Emerald Necklace Metro Parks, a natural world of newts and underrock salamanders, my parents moved when I finished first grade to Cleveland's west suburbs near Avon Point along the north coast of Lake Erie, once famous for Beach Park, which was then easily accessible on the Lakeshore Electric Railway that ran beyond Avon Point to Lorraine, Sandusky, and all along the north coast. This was the Great Lake upon which my great-grandfather James Higgins earned his living as a pleasure boat ship's captain, leaving from Cleveland's East 9th Street Pier and going west to Detroit or east to Buffalo. My own childhood hours spent fishing from the concrete piers behind the coal-burning electric power plant seemed a minuscule substitute for my great-grandfather's Great Lakes life. For some improbable to articulate reason beyond my late adolescent understanding, and because of a cumulative grade point average that reflected my years as an unmotivated and easily distracted student, I attended the College of Steubenville for my freshman year. Steubenville was the first actual city in which I lived. In retrospect, I now see that I sought something more than the semi-rural expanding suburb I had known up to that time. The sequestered hilltop location of the college campus gave me a wide view of the old industrial city built along the slow-moving Ohio River, one far larger than the knee-deep in places of the Rocky River of my early childhood. This grand river was different, for it seemed to offer some vague truths awaiting my discovery. For my sophomore year, I transferred downriver to attend Xavier University, a Jesuit institution in Cincinnati, the oldest large city in Ohio. And from up at Eden Park, I could see the great swath of the river below me. One curious day, I discovered an old, leaning set of concrete steps I could walk down all the way to the near downtown banks of the Ohio River. I marveled at the heady feeling of experiencing something so large and powerful as what I'd only seen in a book or an encyclopedia. In that moment, I encountered an actual river. Looking upriver, I could see the future coming toward my 19-year-old self, see it momentarily flow slowly in front of me, and then watch it like my past as it curved with the landscape and receded. I spent a lot of time off campus that year. I was either down in Clifton, a Bohemian district near the university in Cincinnati, or up in Mount Adams, an old German neighborhood that was experiencing early gentrification from college stoners and capitalistic hippies. Despite some gaps in my memory, this is the late 1960s, remember, I discovered a coffee shop that made espresso in small aluminum Bialetti makers, a method startlingly different from the instant coffee my parents and I constantly drank. Rich and strong as the imported chocolates I was discovering, complex and lush as the French wines I was trying, espresso was as compact and dense as the hashish my peers were smoking, My very impressionable 19-year-old taste buds were so dazzled that I spent star-struck hours peering into the demitasse of espresso as if into the eyes of a new lover. Once, though, my infatuation was interrupted when a barista asked me if I wanted something to eat along with my espresso. "Let me get you a croissant," she said. It was love at first sight. The creamy, almost new snow color, the lightly brown tips and the top layer baked to crisp perfection. I pulled lightly from each horned end as if it was a pastry party favor, and the croissant practically unraveled into two pieces in my hands, the lacy white interior delicate as a tatted doily, that decorative frivolity set on the china plate upon which sweet pastries are placed and presented. Oh, the breathtaking near weightlessness. Oh, the scent of, wait, real butter. And the taste was love at first bite. Buttered air, sweet dough, enough luscious gluten to send me into a carb coma. This was the cotton candy of the pastry world. This, the crescent waxing toward the full moon dream cuisine of the gourmand, the bon vivant, the Epicurean, the hedonist. There, right there at my small table, next to my notebook, sat an espresso and a croissant. But it was more than mere love. It was a complete abandonment to my newfound bliss. And from then on, I would always get a table for three. Bon appetit. According to Prosper Montaigne, author of the 1938 Larousse Gastronomique, the Encyclopedia of Food, Wine, and Cookery, American translation, 1961, third printing, one finds among the roughly 8,500 recipes scattered over its 1,100 pages the alphabetical index for croissants on pages 322 and 323. Because the editor of the 1938 edition, Phileas Gilbert, calls the volume a reliable counselor ready to be consulted, I accept the origin story of the croissant as presented by Montaigne to be true. He dates it to the 1686 siege of Budapest by the Turks. Bakers busy at night making breads discerned the sound of their tunneling enemies and gave alarm, saving the city. To honor their heroic act, the bakers were rewarded with permission to create a special pastry that resembled the crescent moon emblem from the Ottoman flag. Oddly, Montaigne does not narrate how this Hungarian delight traveled to become the distinct pastry of the boulangerie patisseries of France. I'll assume word of mouth. Visiting Paris in 2008, I was keen to taste as many French croissants as possible, both early in the morning at the Montparnasse brasseries accompanied by espresso, or in the well-lighted late-night brasseries joined by Médoc and Bordeaux wines. I proclaimed each croissant a tie with those previously sampled and ordered more. Paris, in my mind, was the home to the absolute and ultimate croissant experience, comparable to a trip to Mecca or Wrigley Field. But then in 2014, my wife Molly and I went to Old Quebec City in Canada, described in my Lonely Planet guidebook as the very next best thing to a European walled city, and very French at that. The Château des Tourelles is an 1898 turreted four-story house converted into a bed and breakfast. It is conveniently located a leisurely 15-minute walk down Rue Saint-Jean toward the Porte Saint-Jean entrance into the castle-like walls of Old Quebec. The turret of the chateau itself leads circularly up 5 stories in a narrow hallway to the flat roof where guests find a wooden deck with iron railings. The deck offers a panoramic view of Église Saint-Jean-Baptiste, the city streets, the huge St. Lawrence River, and the low blue Laurentian mountains that lie north of the city. Our second night on the roof, my wife Molly and I had just finished a bottle of lush Two Sisters Niagara River Cabernet Franc and opened a cuvée from St. Patronville vineyards on the Isle d'Orléans. The next morning, we decided to have lunch on the rooftop. So we set off to purchase some good local goat cheese and a baguette or croissant to have with the rest of the cuvee. We asked for shopping recommendations. William, the young French-Canadian manager of the chateau, told us that almost every block in the old city had a cheese shop, but there really was only one place to buy croissants, Le Pain Gruel, an artisanal bakery on Rue Saint-Jean known for its organic ancient grain breads. When we asked him for the address, William laughed and told us to follow our noses. Walking down the sidewalk inside Quebec's old city walls, I wondered whether Le Pain Gruel bakery actually existed or if it was some sort of French-Canadian boulangerie mirage. Then, at the very same moment, Molly and I stopped on the sidewalk. We stood absolutely still. We raised our heads, sniffing the air like scent hounds ready for the chase. An intense, fresh-baked bread scent intoxicated us, drew us enchantedly toward the inset spring green door as we walked, like string-operated marionettes, into the Le Pain Gruel bakery. Warm oak cabinets, earth-colored tile floors and counters, and rich red trim. It felt perfect for this boulangerie. We sampled small bites of day-old rye bread, stood transfixed as soldiers at attention in front of baskets of baguettes, standing like swords raised in defense against the mediocrity of commercial bakery. And then I turned and I saw the cooling rack, a treasure chest laden with spilled golden crescent coins. I stared like a man entranced. I wasn't breathing. I actually couldn't talk. Instead, I could only point, and did. How many croissants? The baker asked. 2, I croaked. No, 3, I said. Make it 4, Molly added. After picking up a round of local goat brie and crisp green apples from a small grocery on Rue Saint-Jean, we walked back up to the Chateau des Tourelles, our strides long as baguettes, our hearts rising like new bread loaves, our hands entwined like braided bread dough. Though the sun on the rooftop deck was warm, a cool late May breeze touched our necks. I looked up from the St. Lawrence River, as magical and mesmerizing as the Grand Ohio River had seemed when I was younger. I turned my focus to the sky, seeking a leftover sliver of moon, but there was none. Molly and I chewed half slices of apple, each of us lulling in a gluten buzz. My crescent roll journey was ending, my archetypal narrative coming to its final point of arrival, like an errant knight's quest completed. The buttery piece of light dough I'd removed from the center of the croissant with my left hand was soft and pliant, like just steamed mussels nestled in a warm ceramic bowl, or like the soft wax tears from poppies used to make opium. I was hooked. Thank you very much.
That was great, Robert. I can hear everyone clapping from their homes. Virtual clap. Thank you so much, Robert, for sharing your wonderful work with us. I am now going to kick it to our wonderful Chief of Staff, Kira Gidkin, who will be interviewing Robert for the rest of the night. If you have any questions you would like answered, just drop them in the Q&A. It's at the bottom of your screen if you're on a PC. And you can type in your question in, and Kira will try her best to answer all of those questions on screen. If not, it looks like Dr. T is answering some of those questions via text. And also the link is in there to buy it as well. Otherwise, thanks again for coming off again. Kira, you're up.
Hi, Robert.
Hi, Kira.
Okay, I am gonna start with saying that I love this book, and I love that it doesn't simply surround Ohio. To anyone who wasn't from Ohio, a book strictly about it wouldn't be super interesting, but your book surrounds you, your adventures, and your experiences that you have because of your home state. Ohio is where you began, and it molded you into the person you are today, the person who travels to Quebec and soaks up every significant detail that life has to offer you. Is this why you chose to name your book after this home state?
Wow, that's a great question. Thank you. Yeah, there's a sense of surround, and I didn't really title it or go in that direction intentionally. These pieces tumbled out, and they began to take shape of a book. And there's a lot of travel in it. When I travel, I take a notebook and I'm constantly jotting things down. That turns into poems or nonfictions or other things. And the aperture is how we see things, what we focus on. We can open it and take the picture big. We can get close-ins. We can do panoramas. And so it was about how I see the world. When I see the larger world, it makes me reconsider how I see my own world, the site that I grew up in, and to reconnect and explore how I was shaped by that. I began to think at one point about the relationship of the site or place where we grow to the way that soil shapes how wines taste from one part of the world, or how apples taste in another part of the world, because it's what's in the soil. And so the geography was really a big part of this book, and the aperture had to do with how I would tell the story. So I've got really small little apertures, I got large apertures. It was a good metaphor. The title was a really good metaphor for me. But yeah, it's really rooted in not reconnecting, but really exploring seriously, almost like intentionally, where I grew up and how it shaped me.
Absolutely. What an amazing answer. I had no idea that soil actually changed the way that wine tasted.
Oh, yeah.
The more you know.
The more you know.
I have certain kinds of questions. Another question I wanted to ask you, what do you want readers to take away from your book, and what can they learn from it?
I think the first thing I'd like people to take away with them from the book is that memoir is such a lush form, and it's how we remember it, and so it's personal in that sense, and the lyrical aspect is to be in it and be the center speaker in it, and I hope that they take away that they like the work, because that's really the best judge of it. I think is if the pieces speak to people, if they jog memory for them. And I think secondarily, I think I'd like people to take away from it that we all are rooted someplace, even if we've moved around in our childhood. I moved between first and second grade. And so I went from one environment, which was a valley environment with a river, to moving where there was I was next to a great lake, and I was on the north coast of America. And so where do we come from? How does our geography lean in on us? How does it shape us? And are we aware of how it shapes us? And I guess maybe that's it. I always think questions are more interesting than answers, because once you have an answer, it's done. It's not fun anymore. That's why questions are great. They lead to another question and another question. And so maybe that's the takeaway. If it starts readers to consider the influence of the places they grew up or places they lived that had a significance on that, that really, I think, would be a great takeaway. Yeah, thank you.
Of course. I know I have a lot of takeaways from when I read your book. It made me really think about where I grew up and how I connected to where I began, and how it has shaped how I've been living my life.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, since you brought up the genre of flash memoir, would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, briefly. Prose poetry is the kind of poetry that I write. Small paragraphs or little sequences of paragraphs. I love the condensed form. I love the way that they're in paragraphs and they're written in sentences. So you have all the sentence rhythms and all the syntax that prose brings, but it's also really charged poetically with sound quality and imagery and conflated or split syntax for effect. And that led me to writing narrative prose poems that then led me to write microfictions and flash fictions. Then I did a book of fiction, which were really brief pieces. But in the writing of that, then I began to realize that and moving into more prose poems, that some of these pieces were really tiny little memoirs. And so I started to really think about that. What happens when you condense this memoir to a small bit? And some of the pieces in the book are a single page or a page or two. So it's that the compressed aspect of it is like espresso, I guess. They're just really packed with detail. And the lyric aspect of it is interesting too, because in fiction, when the first person pronoun I is used, that's a character. That's not me. That's a character. And if I were a playwright, I would put that pronoun in the mouths of characters on the stage or in a film. But in poetry and creative nonfiction, that personal pronoun is always me. And so it was a place where I could go, and not just doing the lyrical nature of poetry, I could do this in prose. It wasn't prose poetry now, this is intentional prose. And I wanted to see what would happen there. And this book really is the result of my exploration of that and finding ways to be free to lyrically speak about my own life in something more than a small poem, but to open it up as I did in the pieces I read. The first piece was a very condensed, short piece. The second one was much larger, much larger. And the I is a very small part of the first one, but it's totally significant to the next one, the larger one. And it's not like writing autobiography, because that's about something different. Okay, now I don't want to go off on that tangent, but I love this form. It just allows me to do things I haven't been able to do in poetry or in fiction, but I can do it here. And it's just, it's a very satisfying book to have written. Very satisfying to me as a person. Yeah.
Absolutely. I do remember in one of our meetings that you and I and Morgan had, you said you, quote, felt comfortable being vulnerable in this genre. And I was wondering I don't really know if you really answered that question already, or if you have more of a tangent that you would like to go off of with that question, but that was one of my questions.
Let's touch on that for a minute, because vulnerability is an issue for a writer. Robert Creeley, the great poet Robert Creeley, has in a poem somewhere, and he puts it in quotes. He says, when the pronoun I, speaks in the poem, he goes, I speak. Because when we are ourselves in a poem, in that lyric moment, we're vulnerable. We can't put it on a character's mouth and say, well, I didn't say that, that character said that. I see people always saying, Shakespeare said to be or not to be. No, Hamlet said that. Whether Shakespeare said it or not is another story. But you are vulnerable when it's you speaking, because there's no mask, there's no artifice. It's just, I'm going to tell you this. And in doing so, things are at risk. Do I get it right? Do I get it true? And in the book, the epigram for the third section is from the great nonfiction writer, G.W. Siebold, who says, and I'm not sure if I can find the book here. Yeah, I'm going to read you this quote because this is so relevant. Hold on a minute, let me find this real quick. Of course, I can't find it quickly because I want to. Here it is. Put my glasses back on for this. Here you go. Siebold writes, you adulterate the truth as you write. There isn't any pretense you try to arrive at the literal truth. And the only consolation when you confess to this flaw is that you're seeking to arrive at poetic truth. And I was just floored by that comment, because the literal truth, the factual truth, the data is one kind of truth, and artistic endeavor is a different kind of truth. And so his distinction between the balance, the challenge of balancing what's literal, this actual place, these actual people, these actual things that took place, are always measured against the aperture of the speaker. And in a way that I discovered what was making this form work for me so much is that these pieces, which were written as prose, are arriving at poetic truths. And that's the lyric nature of being vulnerable and using the personal pronoun I in it.
Of course. And then another question I have also about the genre, and then after that we can move on.
Okay.
How is a memoir different from an autobiography?
Oh, here we go. Okay, this is a matter of distance. Okay, how close we get to get to the truth of things. A biographer writes about a person from the outside. They do the research and then they tell the story in terms of what they want to do. Is this a biography of someone's great achievements? Is it about the person behind it? I'm rereading a biography of Frank Lloyd Wright after having read his autobiography, which is a remarkable work of fiction. But then autobiography is if I wanted to tell my story, but those are typically written by famous people who are celebrity in some way. They've achieved something and they become these sources of inspiration, or the autobiography. We want to hear it from the person themselves. And there's some good fiction in some of that too, because the autobiography allows you to dismiss things you don't want to talk about that a biographer is going to bring in, okay? And there's lawsuits over biographies all the time. But if I had written an autobiography, I would be tied to the reality of it, the sequence of things. I would have to tell it sequentially. I'd have to try to be objective at the same time I'm the subjective speaker. But a memoir is a memory, and memory isn't sequential. It's incomplete. It's very fragmentary. Sometimes memory, I've had recurring memories in my life. I think like we all do. And some of these pieces are based on recurring memories. And I began to think, why do these keep coming back to me? I don't seek them out. They come to me from my subconscious. And so memoir is this kind of a dreamy state in a way. I don't feel bound by journalism, the precision of journalism. So I guess I'd say there's journalism and then biography and then autobiography and then memoir. And on the other side, I don't know what's after that. Maybe I'll get there next. Maybe that's fantasy though. Maybe that's fantasy writing. I don't know.
I'm sure we'd all appreciate to see what you come up with fantasy writing.
Careful what you wish for.
Why don't we talk about the book now?
Yeah.
I believe that me and Shelby Ballwig were wondering, of course, all of your stories you feel very connected to and they're very important to you,
Yeah.
but which story do you believe holds a truly special place in your heart?
That's it's the off the cuff, probably. That's the piece about several generations in my family. It's the story of a lost cufflink. And it's the story of how my great grandfather had a cufflink, had lost one of a set of cufflinks. And my grandfather, who died when I was very young and I barely knew, had one of the cufflinks that he saved. And he had it made into a tie pin. You'd pin your tie in so it wouldn't flop around under your vest or something. And then my father took that stick pin and turned it into a ring. And when my father died, I wound up with my father's ring. And so that's 4 generations on this small item that's passed down, and I've got a son and 2 grandsons. And so it's a trace, it's a multi-generational trace linked by some small object. And it was really an exploration for me about how a single thing, simple things can stitch us together. Yeah.
Beautiful.
And I think, I don't know, maybe, I think that piece, because it was very, very personal to me to do that piece. There's a piece about my mother in there too, and about my father after they passed away. Those are very, very personal to me, but I wanted to honor them. So I put them in the book.
Of course. Beautiful.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you had a certain book you want. Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize. That's not about your book. That was a different question. Oh, this one pertains to Tasting a New Moon.
Yeah.
Do you plan to travel after the pandemic, and do you plan to travel back to Quebec? Also, can you please bring me back a croissant?
Well, listen, I could promise you I'd do that, but like, I'd be hard pressed not to give you the empty bag. When I saw it, I was like, I just couldn't, it was there.
It was looking at me.
Yeah. Yeah, you should go to Quebec sometime. It's a remarkable city. It really is. Quite remarkable.
I would love to. Also, speaking about the pandemic, how has the pandemic affected either what you write about or your writing process? Like, have you written more or less since the pandemic started?
That's a very good question. My wife Molly and I talk about how fortunate we are to have, we're both writers. And so we have the ability to produce things, and that's what we do. And so in an odd way, although we were restricted, cloistered, I think of it sometimes as, we had our art. And so I finished a lot of final revision on this book, working with all of you at the press. I finished a new book of poems I've got out looking for a publisher. I've done a lot of editing on other projects I'm doing. I've been revisiting a novel I want to go back to that I set down some years back, and I want to come back to that now and pick up that and move on. So, and I always work on multiple things. You know, I learned long ago, if I only do one thing and it doesn't work, then what? You know, and that to me is what I think a lot of people consider, what's the term they use? When you hit, you're stuck, you can't move on. I can't think of that term that's used there. You know, anyhow, writer's block. So if I've got multiple things, a couple of projects going, I can sit down at the desk with the intention of working on one thing, and if it works, then I do that. But some days I sit down and that isn't working. I move that off the desk and I pull something else on the desk and I work on that. And if that doesn't work, then I read, and I'll be several pages into something or a lot of pages into something, and the next thing I know, I'm over at my desk again, looking for, so I'll pick up something and I want to explore it. So that's kind of how that works. It's being multiple and having a lot of things going on at one time, and just trusting the sense of it. My friend Eric Wasserman told me that one time. He said, when I get up, I write whatever I want to write. I don't do it chronologically. I just wake up and I go, that's what I want to write today, or I want to revise that today. Always just going where the buzz and the light is, you know? Yeah.
You just answered like 4 of my questions. So I did want to ask though, real quick, what your next project was going to be and like what you're writing now, because you did just bring it up, and I thought I'd ask.
Yeah. I want to go back to this novel. I don't think when I started it, I knew how to write a novel yet. After I started that and set it down, I did a book of short stories and gathered a lot and wrote some new ones and finished a book of short stories, which was really, really remarkably helpful to me. And now I've done another prose work. So I feel like I've been on this long detour, but I'm coming back to it now feeling like a lot of the things that puzzled me before now are clearer to me now. And I feel I have the confidence to go on and at least finish get a finished draft out and start getting a lot of response back on that. Because boy, that's half of a challenge. It's a lot of pages.
I bet. I'm so scared. I start so many projects and I don't even finish them. I don't know. I guess
We
you
all
just
do that.
with it.
We all do that. A lot of times you have to write through one thing and set it aside to get to the next thing you really need to get to.
Of course. We do have Q&A questions, quite a few actually.
Okay.
Here is one from a man named Bob. I don't know how to say his last name and I don't want to mess it up, so I won't. He says that you have an amazing reading voice and he was wondering if you'd like to make this book into an audiobook someday.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Sure. I hadn't even thought about that. I do like reading. I read a lot as a child, and I stuttered when I was a child, and so I was very shy about reading out loud and maybe even speaking a lot in front of a lot of people. And so I've really practiced that a lot, the art of doing that. Some years back, I started hanging out in Cleveland with a lot of the people up there who were early in the spoken word movement, and asked a lot of questions. Ask them how they did it, how you get the impact of that, and I think that to me, and see, this is where lyric nonfiction is interesting to me, lyric memoir. Because like in poetry, when if I'm reading a book of prose out loud, I'm just reading sentences. I'm just reading sentences for the information that carries the plot forward. But when I'm doing, for example, a narrative prose poem or a memoir that has a narrative thread, I'm very much aware of where the lyric sound of poetry is in it. And so I'm reading carefully. I'm reading for impact. In a way, it's kind of like singing the prose a little bit. And so, and I think it just comes from the fact that I've always loved listening to stories. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, we certainly had no idea that you had any kind of issue speaking. You sound amazing and professional.
Thank you.
Bob would also like to know, how does your approach to writing shorter nonfiction differ from writing prose poetry?
Intention. Now, I'll qualify that. Prose poetry is meant to be short. Lyric memoir doesn't have to be short. But what I tend to do is very rarely do I write a nonfiction lyric memoir in just a straight run. I break them into sections, and I do what's called, what I've learned from doing braided essays, where you start with one thing, and like, for example, I started with my mother, and then it moved to these dinner rolls, and suddenly I'm telling you about the history of the Pillsbury Doughboy, and then I'm back somewhere else, and now I'm going to talk about this French cookbook, and that moving around each of those pieces. I try to design those in a way that they can stand alone. Okay, they're almost like freestanding pieces. I want to hone them to that level of precision. And then when they're orchestrated, and I mean that in the musical sense, when they're orchestrated into rises and falls and all the rest of that, that comes out of classical music, or letting it go into jazz if I want to, or is to be organized as a ballad form. There's a real sense of how that is all intuitionally connected. Intuitionally in terms of trusting the form of it, knowing that it's going to find its shape if I let it work it out. Did that answer that question? I feel like I got off on a way tangent there.
It's your book launch. You're doing great. We have a couple more.
Okay.
How much research was involved in writing these essays?
Oh, that's a very good question. The piece toward the end, Hard Shale Dreams, is about a cemetery in Avon Lake, where I grew up. And when I first started that piece, I couldn't find much on it. And it was really funny because when the book was picked up, I was looking something up and I found that somebody had done a book on it. So I got the book and I tracked it down. I rewrote all these parts. And there were some things that I didn't know about it that I learned in researching that. There were always these mysterious unmarked stones, and somebody finally solved who they were. Some of the research is personal research in terms of what I know about places when I go there. So in the piece about the croissants, I immediately went to the LaRouche because it's one of my favorite books. Everybody should own a copy. It's fabulous. If you want to learn the recipes for how to cook a dog if your city's under siege, it's in there. Seriously. But it's the history. I mean, it's just beautiful. How far to wade out in the ocean to pull things off the floor of the sea. But yeah, I did that. And I've got one where in my Valdemar car piece, there's a section about, which is taken from the title, The Strange Facts in the Case of Monsieur Valdemar by Edgar Allan Poe. And you can imagine what that's all about. But I did a lot of research on that. What was the reaction to it? What did people think about it? I had a whole paragraph in there about the origin of the Datsun B210, which played a part in this. So sometimes it's fun. I get this idea and then I go do the research and it leads me to other things that get more interesting. And sometimes, I thought it was really interesting because in the opening piece, it involves flying in an airplane from Ohio to one of the Lake Erie Islands. And I didn't know this. It's the shortest airline flight in the world. And it takes you to an island that has the largest geode in the world you can walk into in the basement of a bar on this island. That kind of stuff's fascinating to me. The quirky stuff. I think I've always liked those, weird facts that pop up that you just go, wow, that's great. I don't know what I'll ever do with that, but that kind of stuff really is interesting to me, and I went round and round because I tried to figure out how many people would fit in this little airplane. And I flew in it. I didn't think there were too many in it. I flew, I was one of the last years they flew. I thought I found the right number, but then somebody doing the research said, I don't think that's right. And so I checked it and I said, no, that's not right either. And I looked around and I kept going back to it. And I finally found in some obscure little museum someplace the exact number of people who sat in that airplane, how many it would hold, and what was the exact model of that plane that took that drive. So it was like, aha, I've got it. It's like, because here's the thing. I think in memoir, because it has a kind of a dreamlike quality to it, it's a matter of my recollection or what maybe someone else has told me that I've imported into my memoir, or over time, some facts drift away and these are the ones that remain, because that's kind of fluid. And sometimes I just have to kind of trust the way I remember it. I have to have a lot of anchors in the real world for it to work. It's like, you got to tie that helium balloon to a stone or something so it doesn't blow away. And so the research is often not where I start. I get the piece going and then I research the things in it, and then it unearths things that allow me to start making connections to other things, so it's very different from the novel I'm working on. I've done a lot of research on that and I have a draft of it, but I'm still doing research on that because new stuff keeps coming up that keeps altering things and changing things, or telling me that since nobody can prove it otherwise, that means I can do what I want to do with it. Yeah.
Of course, that'll help me write my research paper for one of my classes. Okay, one more Q&A question, and
Sure.
then possibly one question after that, and then we're good to go.
Okay, thank you.
How has reading online this year differed from reading in person previously? Like about your pieces and like book launches such as this.
That's a question a lot of us are asking. You know, it's like my book of poems, Orpheus and Echo, which is part of a 3-book collection, 3-in-1 book collection from Etruscan Press, and the it's called Triptych. It's 2 other poets and I. We were ready to. We had a week of events lined up, and then I was coming back from. I was going to come back from New York, from Wassaic, New York, where Molly and I were writers. At a writer's retreat, and everything shut down. So we wound up doing my first Zoom. What's different is I can't judge the audience. Not only don't I see them and how they physically react, I can't watch their faces for things. I can't know if I don't know if the humor is going to work, or if I'm going to say something. You know, if I want sometimes I want to drop something. I want to see if sometimes people will like, you know, that little gasp, like, where'd that come from? None of that's there. And so it's really it's really different in that regard. And I really like the opportunity after to meet people as we're waiting for the event to start, to talk to people afterwards. I heard Terry Tempest Williams read one time, and she literally stood at the door and welcomed everybody into the reading. And afterwards, she sat down and she had a chair in front of the desk. And if you wanted a book signed, she would sit there and talk to you. And then she would write something personal. The line was there for 2 hours. Nobody cared. We just sat there listening to her talk. I was so amazed by that. Not just only the generosity of it, but the idea that it's like there's that contact we get with people, and that's I really miss that. I really miss talking to people afterwards, and I like to know what people like in the work, and because it helps me shape over the period of the first maybe 6 months I'm out reading it, to know what are the best pieces to do readings on. Sometimes I think readings don't reach their maximum because this is my opinion. I'm not going to say anything about anybody else. I want to give people what they want to hear. I want to know what people like. I want to know what's popular with listeners, because I don't want to go in and read something just for myself because, boy, this was a clever piece. I'm going to read this because this was clever and I'll look like the clever guy. So I don't want to do that. I really want to, and it's not that I'm just being a performer, but I think it's important to hone your reading list to what works for people oftentimes who haven't read the book. They don't have it in front of them, and all they've got to rely on is what their ear gives them. And so it's really important for me to try to figure that out. And that's one of the things that I think I understood was important from a lot of the performance poets I knew up in Cleveland, how they would do that. They would really figure out what were the pieces that got people. And I'd see those people and they'd keep doing a lot of those same pieces because people really responded to them. So I miss that. I miss the party, the carnival atmosphere that takes place after readings.
I think we all miss that. We all miss the contact, being around anybody. We all miss it.
Yeah, but it's changing.
So sorry, what?
It's changing. It's starting to change.
Yeah.
Yes.
New normal. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask a quick question about the press and then we can be finished. Have you enjoyed your experience with us? What was your favorite part?
Oh my gosh. I probably worked with 7 or 8 presses. I used to do a lot of small chapbooks. I've done, independent presses. I've had so many presses I've worked with. What you guys are doing up there in Wisconsin, at Stephen's point, and the way the program is put together, the quality of work that you all do is just really so impressive, and everyone has just been so welcoming, and the interaction I've had with people on almost every level is terrific. So responsive to things. I remember when, like I suggested this really wonderful artist whose work I like, Morgan Dyer, could we look at something? And suddenly everybody is like, yeah, we like this. And I was just so happy, because when I met Morgan, I remember we were talking, I said, I really like your work. Did you ever think about doing a book cover? And she goes, never thought about that. And I go, your work's perfect. I could really see this on a book at some point. And so to have that all come to fruition because of the way that everybody has been so open to discussion, I've never felt like, I don't want to do the nevers. Let's just stay with the things I like. Everybody's just been so good. Everybody's been so good. And I've had so much fun on the Zooms, and the podcast was fun. And Molly did the Instagram the other day. We took over the Instagram, which basically Molly did. So that was so much fun. We had so much fun doing that the other day, walking around this one of the last stands of original trees in this part of Ohio. We just walked through there, and Molly asked me questions and I gave answers. And I love the Instagram. They're like a whole series of little flash pieces, little micro pieces, little prose poems almost. I love that format. So we had so much fun, and it was a beautiful day. And we heard tree frogs and bullfrogs and spring peepers. It was so wonderful loud.
You could hear it in the video. It was so authentic. I loved it very much. Thank you so much, Robert. I have enjoyed our conversation.
Yes, me too. Thank you very much. You've been an excellent question asker.
Thank you. It's my first time. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Kira and Robert. And this is the part of the show where we all come on stage and we do the bow thing, right? Because we're all really hankering to get back out in public. So thank you everyone for attending. It was so nice to see so many folks come in and listen to Robert's work, and to celebrate what my staff is able to do. My predecessor, Dan Dieterich, who founded the press in 1984, he said, what your students will do is a small miracle. And so don't ever take that for granted. And now 5 years into this thing, we've been making an awful lot of small miracles. Robert's, I believe, I think it's my 15th title with my 10th staff.
Wow.
And yep, we just keep on making small miracles. And I'm really proud of my students. This has been a really wonderful, wonderful group. And we have so many wonderful authors and writers coming to you in the future. So Roberts is starting a whole new series. We already have several books acquired to join Robert in this series, and his work is why we started the series. So I don't want that to be forgotten either. So with that, everyone, thank you so much for being here. Morgan and Kira, thank you for doing a wonderful job as managers of the event. Robert, my friend, it is good to be your friend and your publisher. Hopefully now I'll just be your friend again. That might be a little easier than also being your publisher. So, all right. Take care, everybody. Thank you,
everyone.
Of course. Good night.
Good night.